in time, any comments, anything else you have, we can include that with the filing. It's typically standard practice when we deal with regulatory orders. But meeting 3 now, so my advice is, let's try to have an open conversation today. Speak now, forever hold your peace, because we really value anybody's input or questions you have when we have these phone calls. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And I forgot to mention that these meetings are being recorded, and I just hit record. So just letting everybody know.
Awesome. All right. Well, we are at meeting 3, like Rob and Jen said. We are going to have a 4th meeting. That would be the wrap up and summary. That was scheduled for February 8th. It's now the 15th. So look for that calendar invite shortly. All right, we're going to jump into a recap on the second meeting. These are the questions from the first meeting. We did go through them last meeting. Happy to go through them again, but we could jump to the questions from the second meeting. And I think, Ed, you wanted to go through these?
Yes. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom in here. Okay. So first question on projects per year that we were talking about, that is in the program, and we keep all of the storage, all of the projects and all the program metrics on the energystorageCT.com website. So if you ever have questions about, the amount of capacity left, that's the place to go. Next one, is there a place where we can get a better breakdown of the rebate and incentive? I think specifically that question was around the breakdown of like exactly how your rebate was calculated, and we can do that. It should give you a good amount of information in Salesforce when you're entering all the project info, and it gives you a rebate. But we're happy to explain it further if you need. We also have the calculator on the website as well, which I think is linked there. So you can go to the contractor resources page, punch in all of your info, and you should get the same rebate that was calculated in Salesforce, and you can use that to show a little more detail about how it was calculated. Next question, to update your profile. This is actually a really important one, and we try to stress this every time we do a contractor training. Check that website periodically, the contractor list on energystorageCT.com, because just make sure everything's up to date. We do have a couple of columns there that I think are very underutilized, and one of them is services offered, and I believe the other one is equipment offered. So you can put on your listing as an eligible contractor that you offer Enphase batteries or Generac, Solarc, things like that, which helps customers find you better. And you can also put other services on there, such as PV, electric vehicle chargers, retrofitting to an existing PV system, or doing new PV and batteries. So definitely check out that website, and you can email us at any time at energystorage@ctgreenbank.com to update. Next one, battery apps can be submitted anytime. Yes, always accepting new apps. So if you need help getting set up on the online portal, again, you can reach out to us. We're happy to schedule a one-on-one contractor training. You can actually do that yourself on the website. You can set up a time to schedule with Green Bank staff to go over like a one-on-one portal training. So that energystorageCT.com. That's the best resource. Again, ballpark for getting the performance-based incentive. Best way to find that is by using the incentive calculator. And there are a couple of additional toggles there that if you know the more specific details of your battery, like the maximum depth of discharge and the degradation rate, you can actually get a little bit more accurate in there. We put some kind of conservative estimates in there for how we think batteries will perform, just to give kind of like a modest estimate of the 10-year performance incentive. But you can play around with those toggles and you can get a little more accurate incentive estimate. Yes, active only dispatch is an option. And I think, Jessica, you had also pointed out that we had a little help icon on the portal that was incorrect, that said that you couldn't do active only. So we got a ticket to get that changed. Eligible contractor website, again, make sure that you're taking a look at that, make sure that your info is correct. And get in touch with Jennifer Runyon to stay on the distribution list for this group. So pretty straightforward list of questions from last time. Again, any other questions, you can ask them here in the chat, or you can send an email to us. All three of us, the Green Bank, Eversource, and UI, we all have contact info for the program, which we have, I believe, at the end of this presentation, which we will send the slides out as well. So I think that covers it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ed. So that brings us to the DERMS enrollment process. And did you want to kick us off?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Zoom out here. Okay. So what we wanted to talk about in this meeting was the enrollment process for batteries. So we talked about customer enrollment in the first one, contractor onboarding in the second, and now this one is about kind of the DERMS, or Distributed Energy Resource Management System setup. So getting batteries enrolled in the program to actually dispatch and earn their incentives. So just wanted to start out by going over the current challenges that we as program admins face. And then that does kind of trickle down to contractors as well. So, we're an open book here. I'm welcome to admit that there are some parts of the process that we just fully don't understand yet, that we need to work out as these relationships with the vendors mature, and just as we get more experience. So the challenges that we face currently are that the responsibilities for enrollment are distributed among contractors, battery OEMs, and I have Energy Hub here, but I mean Energy Hub and GGS, the two DERMS providers, and the program admins. And the process is not the same to enroll a battery in the program for all OEMs. And I think Energy Hub's going to talk about that a little bit later. And troubleshooting enrollment issues, consequently, is difficult for us because there are times when something may not be showing up correctly, and we just don't really know where the problem lies. So the goal outcomes of this discussion, and then what we hope to get from further discussion and questions through this process, is to outline the enrollment process for every eligible OEM in the program, which they may be different for different OEMs, but we hope that they will be pretty close to the same. And to clearly define the responsibilities and troubleshooting methods for the various issues that may occur, and overall to shorten the timeline from commissioning a battery to dispatching and receiving an incentive payment. So we'll jump to the next slide here. So this is the current enrollment process as we understand it. So starting from the top left, there's sort of two things that happen simultaneously. And that's once the battery is installed. So we're kind of ignoring the whole approval process, which we went over in meeting one. This is kind of starting at the completion. The contractor will finish the installation, and sometime at the time of installation, they'll register the BESS with the manufacturer, which I'll get to in a little bit. We're definitely looking for input from the manufacturers on how that process works. And then shortly after they do that, they'll submit the completion application to the Green Bank, which we will review. And assuming that the registration went well and there were no hiccups, the battery is now enrolled in its appropriate terms. The Green Bank will verify that connection, and then we'll be able to issue the incentive payment. And then at that point, we'll send the confirmation of funds letter. It's enrolled and everything's, should be working for the next 10 years. So if you hit next, Sarah, I'll show that these two here are kind of literally for us at least, sort of a bit of a black box, just because we don't totally understand how that works. And there's a lot of back end processes that we may not necessarily need to be super involved with, but it is helpful for us to know. So I think getting some info from both GGS and Energy Hub and from some of the OEMs will be helpful. So if you hit next, this is where I will open it up here. So this is kind of where I'm going to stop for a moment. And I think before we open it up to Energy Hub or GGS, are there any battery operators or OEMs on the line that are willing to share some of their commissioning process, or just kind of what that process is like? Do you use an app, website? Does customer do it? And any contractors too that want to speak up about that as well.
Yeah, Tony from Savant here. We use an app to commission our batteries.
Okay.
Yep.
Could you go into a little bit more detail about kind of what that involves at the site, and what information is needed from the contractor or the customer in order to get this to kind of get it out of their hands?
Yeah, it's kind of like an installer app versus a homeowner app. The installer will have gone through the training and downloaded the app and done that prior. And then once there is once it's installed, they use the installer type app, and then that kind of sends something over to the homeowner where they enroll, and then they have access to their battery information and app on the customer facing app.
Okay. And is that something where the customer's utility account information and address and those types of things will be needed, or is this just strictly on-site, just hardware connection type of stuff?
Yeah, this is hardware connection, and that's where a Energy Hub or GGS integration on our end would be needed for this program.
Okay.
Yep.
So once the contractor fills out their portion, it would send it off to the customer to fill out some of the rest of it. Is that right?
Yeah, yep. That would probably be correct in these cases. Yep.
Okay. And then your integration with Energy Hub or whoever else would kick in and
Exactly. Yep.
from
And
there.
that
Okay.
they would basically have the control over it, but the customer would have visibility into what's going on.
Okay. Thank you. And Tony, you said you're from Savant Power?
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, this is Abby from Franklin. Pretty much similar to what Tony just mentioned. Once the system is commissioned the way how it's supposed to be, the homeowner does see an option for virtual power plants that gets populated on their app. And then it's the typical filling out that form, which triggers, again, Energy Hub and then Franklin working through next steps there. But agreed with Tony. That's a similar process for us as well at Franklin.
Abby, it's Ella here from Energy Hub. I have a quick question.
Hey,
For the Connecticut Green Bank program specifically, how do you only surface that offer to customers that have already gone through the Connecticut Green Bank approval? Because it's not like every customer in Connecticut is eligible for this program, right? They're only eligible if they've done the other application from their contractor. So how is that flow managed on your end?
On our end, you mean?
Yeah. Or like, do you just allow most customers to apply to the Connecticut Green Bank program, even if they haven't necessarily gone through the Connecticut Green Bank flow?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have any outward communication or like recommendation to the homeowner. We definitely on our website, we have information on that there, but we basically speak about the eligibility from the standpoint of being part of Eversource or UI first. And then we've definitely, provided them with well, at least that's taken care of by the installer primarily, I would say, with regards to, and it typically happens in parallel. So there could be instances where the homeowner now is seeing a gap between that process running on the background and getting kickstarted with the system installed and running through that, which it's not ideal necessarily, but again, that's something that's definitely we can work on improving from a workflow standpoint. But yeah, we basically recommend consumers to work with their installers when it comes to sort of pre-signing and at least setting up for the specific program here.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Ali, do you think this is a good opportunity for us to kind of go through what we had prepped? I think kind of what we've just heard is similar to what we have prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm happy to turn it over unless any other contractors or OEMs want to, if they have like a different type of process. But it sounds like that is pretty typical. Barry,
just real quick, I'll just confirm Enphase, we do a portal for our installers that they can go to and upload all the necessary documentation, and then we enroll them after they've gone through that process. It's been approved and everything else.
Okay. And when you say that you enroll them, is that like an automated process, or is that something that you kind of verify one by one?
It's a little more manual. I mean, we do try to automate it, but it's right now the way we've integrated is not as automated as it could be, but it's semi-automated, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Steve, do you think you can speak to what you like the installer portal you have for the CTSS program versus the in-app experience you have for maybe other programs you run, and why that looks different from the Enphase side?
Yeah, sure. The in-app enrollment that we do for, other programs that don't have an upfront incentive and aren't worried about reservations of funds and things like that, the homeowner can just, after the battery's installed, typically, they can go right into the app and sign up themselves to the program. They can walk through a number of steps that shows them, this is the information we think is on file at your utility. You can update it if you need to. You maybe add a utility account number, and then you look at our terms and conditions, program terms and conditions right there on your app on your phone, and then you can sign it right there on your phone and then submit it. And then it takes a few days for it to kind of travel through us and then Energy Hub and then the utility and then back. It's approved, and the customer can be can see that it's what process it's in, and then it's finally approved, and then they can go ahead and see. We have a user experience where they can kind of see when events are scheduled and what their performance is and that kind of thing. So that whole process can be pretty quick. For the customer, it might take them 10 minutes or something, just go through that, and then it takes a few days to get approved. And once that's done, they're ready to go. The only challenging thing there is we don't have that. That's for the programs that don't have the upfront incentive typically.
Or the separate application, like where there's a part where the customer or contractor applies outside of the Enphase app, right?
Right. That's where we can put program terms and conditions from, from utility and to the customer right there in our app. And we put our own terms and conditions for our customers in the app. So you can have different paperwork that you can sign, and then we can share that through Energy Hub to the utility. But the challenging thing is we're doing all that after the battery's installed. And if you have an upfront incentive and you need reservation of funds, we haven't figured out a good flow yet for that. But we'd be open to figuring something out.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks for that, Steve. All right, I just wanted to give a quick background to Energy Hub, who we are. We are the residential DERMS provider for the CTSS program. We function to provide our utility clients access to behind the meter grid edge devices all over the country, and all different types of devices. So we are the largest provider of these kind of DERMS grid services in the United States. When it comes to the battery programs, we not only are the administrator for this one, but also the Connected Solutions program in the Northeast and a few other programs around the country. My name is Ella. I'm a partner operations manager here. So I work day to day with a lot of the different battery OEMs that are on this call to get them up and running in programs and get these programs successful. So we're on the exact same page as the Green Bank here and talking in terms of what we want to talk about today. We do want to focus on these two parts of the enrollment flow. Kind of how the contractor or customer registers their device with the OEM, and then how the OEM sends it to us. So I think you heard verbally from a few different OEMs on they have like an in-app experience in terms of getting the customer registered with the OEM, but then we can also share a little bit more about how that after the customer clicks submit, what happens in the Energy Hub platform. So we put together kind of a OEM agnostic, we'll call it an enrollment flow, how a customer might surface or interact with a program in the first place and send their information to us. So typically a customer would get some kind of marketing email after their system is on and operating and eligible to be registered in our platform. We cannot like enroll devices before they're installed and online, right? So we don't want customers to start their enrollment before that time. So yeah, a customer would get an email, maybe an in-app notification like Steve was just talking about, and kind of click on this sign up button, assuming the program looks interesting to them. Then they would log into some kind of app or some kind of maybe online portal where their device information would be stored and their account information is saved. If they have a couple different devices, or maybe they, some apps don't just manage batteries, but they also manage solar or inverters or EV chargers. So they kind of choose the device and the program to register into. And then this is the part where they would essentially apply. They're filling out their information. They are agreeing to the terms and conditions to the program at this point. And then upon submitting the application with their OEM or with their aggregator or however they're interacting with their device, that is when the device information comes to us. So we facilitate the enrollment of the VSS with the DERMS from our OEM partners via API most of the time, also via some different like data sharing processes. But really, this is the information that comes to us. We get the customer, call it PII, the name, address, specific information relating to them. And then the partner the OEM kind of pairs that with this like device specific information. So the UUID, when it was installed, the specifications of the device, and all of that comes into our platform and then is surfaced to either the utility or in this case also the Connecticut Green Bank for review. So I do want to note, like after that customer hits submit on their application and before the information comes to us either via API or CSV, that process varies a lot. Sometimes it's totally automated by the OEM. Sometimes it is a manual process. So that can take a different amount of time. But once that is in review in our platform, the program administrators can approve or reject it, and customers will get that kind of email. And this is like from their OEM, so it can look very different for every different company that's got a technology that's approved in this program. But they'll kind of get confirmation, hey, your application was pending, now it's approved, or now it's rejected, and please resubmit. So I'll pause there for a second if there's any questions or thoughts about kind of how a customer could interact with their OEM and then how the OEM sends that information to Energy Hub.
Yeah, Ella, it looks like there's a question here, and I was about to ask the same thing. The process that you just described, is that just actually maybe back one more, maybe back one more. The enrollment flow, there you go. That's what happens in other markets and like in connected solutions, for instance, but it's not what happens currently in ESS. Is that right?
I mean, this can look different ways for different partners. I think some of them do implement a customer first enrollment flow after, or this could be somewhere where an installer is coming in and filling out the same information.
Okay.
Like
So-
what Steve just said for Enphase. So this enrollment flow would be more targeted to an installer, right? After the system is online,
I
the
see,
installer
okay.
comes in and puts this information in so that essentially the same process can happen, right? That customer specific information comes to us.
Steve, can you confirm if that's, and I know you're maybe just making a hypothetical, but so the contractor has an additional step with Energy Hub in addition to enrolling the system in the OEM's app.
So I want to be clear, this isn't, and this is just like a example of what any of the OEMs could be surfacing to their customers or partners.
Oh, okay.
Energy Hub does not host at this.
Okay,
This is
gotcha.
just like a, plain,
Gotcha.
yeah. Sorry for the confusion there. So this is
Nope,
what,
that makes
yeah.
perfect sense. Thank you.
And Ed, I think part of your question was, how does this differ between different battery programs like connected CTESS versus connected solutions, for example? And the high level process is required for both, right? So like,
because no matter what, we need Energy Hub and other DERMs need customer specific and device specific information to flow through our OEM partners to us, because that's how the device gets registered in the DERMS and becomes controllable, right? So at the end of the day, no matter what, our OEM is sending us this information, and the enrollment flow looks pretty similar.
Okay, but that information is never given to you directly by, say, a contractor or a customer. It's only given to you through backend or direct communication, right, through your board.
Yeah, correct.
And okay, gotcha. Jessica, Greg, I see you had that question. Does that help answer your question too?
I think it does. That was a bit confusing on our end here, but I think that clarifies it to an extent. Just referencing back to what Steve was saying with the Enphase enrollment, we as the contractor enroll our customers through the separate intake portal for Enphase, and then Enphase emails us and lets us know they've received the application and all the documentation. They'll hear from us within 48 hours or so about the status. And during that time, it was our understanding that Enphase is communicating with Energy Hub to get the DERMS portion enrolled.
Yeah, so that's during that 48 hours, this process is happening where Enphase is sending us this information and the BSS enrollment is coming into our DERMS platform for review. So this kind of customer facing experience in your scenario is actually a contractor facing experience. But at the end of the day, right, you're still logging in, uploading customer specific information and submitting that for enrollment, right?
Yes, within the Enphase specific platform.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the similar process. Instead of customer facing, it's contractor facing. But really, like each individual device and enrollment is flowing through this process, right? That's kind of what we're trying to illustrate here.
Okay. And then you're saying that this happens differently with different OEMs. So for example, we have other OEMs that we've worked with where we submit forms and we don't know where they go and we don't hear from them about what's going on the DERM side of things. So it's within that time frame they're enrolling with Energy Hub separately?
Yeah, because that could also be up in the right-hand corner here. This process is not automated on the OEM side. So whatever your portal looks like with your OEM or whatever, like if you're emailing them forms, it sounds like an individual on the OEM side needs to collect them and collate them and send them to us. And what we really prefer is an automated flow there or a customer first flow really. But it's not always possible with the program design, like Steve mentioned, like with the upfront incentive, there needs to be additional like steps into it. So I think that's probably the delays you're experiencing there.
But again, the high level process is the same for every OEM, like that every OEM sends the customer information and the device information to the Energy Hub DERMS for review by the program administrator.
Okay, understood.
Yep.
Brenda, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just thanks, Ella and Energy Hub for reviewing this. I think just as we're talking about the differences between Connected Solutions and CTESS and the pain points we're feeling, in regards to CTESS, and I'll focus on active participant only, since that is the easiest to compare to Connected Solutions. Someone as an aggregator, we're already doing this process. And so it really just highlights with Energy Hub in terms of this application and everything we have to flow to get submitted and enroll. And so it really just highlights the pain point again of the initial application with CT Grain Bank and the multiple touch points that are required there, as well as the approval prior to this process. For us, I think in reviewing this, it just highlights again our interest and our need in maybe making this the one-time touch point or just streamlining it through Energy Hub or something of that nature. So just wanted to make sure we got to comment on that, and we'll continue to include that in our comments in writing as well.
Thanks, Brenna. Yeah, I think
Thank
that
you, Brenna.
what I wanted to talk about next is something that the application working group has been talking about, specifically for the active only flow. We can all acknowledge right now that we don't have a solution for an upfront incentive, how to, secure that without having some kind of pre-qualification, some kind of additional application. But for the active only flow where customers aren't getting upfront money, talking about how we can make this just a customer only. There's no split in, things happening concurrently. We have a single flow of information and process for the customer. So this could look like, the customer gets their battery installed, and that customer receives in-app or email or whatever kind of other marketing or outreach from their OEM saying, great, time to apply to the CTESS program. Customer registers their BES with the OEM via in-app or web or whatever other customer-facing enrollment flow that the OEM has developed. Then, through that process we just highlighted, the OEM sends that enrollment information to the DERMS where it's surfaced to the Green Bank. They can confirm the customer is eligible. They can accept them into the DERMS, and then kind of the customer is enrolled and eligible for dispatch and pay for performance. So, Brenna, is that the kind of flow you were just speaking to?
Correct. Yeah. I can add more detail if needed, but yes, that is definitely that is definitely what we're thinking in terms of just the need to have the approval prior to this, and how can we streamline it, because it starts to be a lot use of resources when there's multiple applications that we're needing to submit in multiple places, and also easily I guess the higher chance of errors, right? Of we need to get the approval from CT Green Bank before we can submit to Energy Hub, and we're always trying to get things more automated and less manual, and the current process is not really allowing for that flow.
Yeah, and I think, Ed, on the first slide, like that you guys showed, like that was a big pain point, right? Making sure that every customer that's approved by the Green Bank is in the Energy Hub DERMS. And I think having those kind of like split flows that happen after it, like in the, I'm just gonna skip back. like having two separate streams of action required after one kickoff point being installed, I think is
Mhm.
where that diversion might be coming a little bit.
Yeah, and that's I think that's definitely something that we can solve, definitely with active only enrollment, but it's going to take a lot more thinking to see if it's doable with passive because of the upfront incentive and being able to send checks and things like that. I see there's an additional question here from Marty. Pending install. Our system has been installed. Oh, okay. So Marty, to answer your question, yeah, so that kind of refers to that top, well, not here, but I guess it would be on the old the old flow slide, which jump back. There you go. Yeah, and so thank you, Ella, also for putting the titles on there. This is for the active and passive flow, and then the new flow that you had proposed later is for passive or active only. So Marty, what you're talking about is that top row there where contractor submits completion application to the Green Bank. That's the step that I think you're referring to, where there's something required on the contractor to submit the paperwork. So again, that's something that we can cover in a training as well. So if you want to reach out to us, we can schedule one.
Great, yeah, that's all Energy really have had to share in terms of how those two steps of the process currently happen and how they will be happening for the active only flow moving forward.
It looks like we have a couple questions. So Amy, why don't you go?
Yeah, hi. So I just I guess when Brenna, it's really helpful to hear from like an actual OEM about like what your, thoughts are, because I think that you're sort of a key piece in this, in that we do have to like connect to the battery and sort of verify that that battery is like in the DERMS. And to me, all this other sort of like pieces around like collecting of information, it almost seems like that's like a second tier to this like first like necessary step. So I almost think about like, could we start even for like the passive incentive approach, could we start with the active only approach that is really centered around making a streamlined like sort of connection between the DERMS and the battery, and then layer on these additional components that might collect the other pieces of information that we need like for the passive, upfront incentive piece. So I don't know if that's, passing information like from Energy Hub over to Green Bank, and Green Bank just sort of doing the upfront approval within, the Mercury platform, like within Energy Hub. And if that's something that could maybe like help to streamline the process, if we like sort of base it on like maybe the most important place to collect information and then try and fill it in from there.
Yeah, I think that's a really,
Amy,
sorry, go ahead, Edward.
No, go ahead, Brenna.
I was going to say, I think that's a really interesting point, and I was thinking similarly around the passive and active. And one of the questions, and I'm happy to submit this as well if this needs to be taken offline, but one of the questions I had was, for the passive plus active, I fully understand that there's many approvals that need to be done because you're giving, a chunk of funding based on the battery, the whole system that's being installed. But I was curious in terms of all of those checkpoints prior to doing this process through the DERMS platform, as we kind of see as like the final phase, which is that final phase is maybe what's the easiest for us because that's what we're doing in other programs right now. How many times are you going through maybe a rejection that requires actual changes to the system that's being installed, or could that process still be done PTO because it's really just verifying what was installed and is activated. And let me know if I need to rephrase that.
Sorry, was that a question for the Green Bank PAs, or was that a question on the interconnection side?
Yeah, it might be for the general green bank. It also, I guess, if like anyone's experienced it, because again, I don't know if someone's gone through that process yet, where maybe they've submitted something pre-install or pre-PTO, and their feedback or rejection, or it's taken a really long process, has actually changed what they decided to install in PT so that it could be correctly installed. And I guess I'm focusing on residential specifically.
Yeah. So, in terms of the rejections that we issue for upfront incentive applications, I mean, having the equipment entered incorrectly or not matching paperwork, that is one of the points that we, will have to reject an app for. It's not the only thing, but yeah, I see your point there. That like having the additional points of entering in data, that can sometimes result in a human error for rejection.
Yeah, and I guess my thoughts are, we have as-builts every once in a while, right, where some things change at installation, and then we go through the permitting process, et cetera. And I'm speaking from like an installer / aggregator, so I know it might not be applicable across the board, but I would just think that, maybe submitting right before PTO or submitting right after PTO won't really change what we're submitting and wouldn't change the approval. And I'm
Right.
curious if that's been considered. And if not, I guess the major reasoning of why it needs to be pre-install, because it potentially could slow down so much installation, pipeline, et cetera. But
Yeah. Okay. So I understand the question now. So we have usually just always done, when it comes to an upfront incentive and when it's something that can be, in this case, up to $16,000, that's something that customers would most likely want to really, really lock in before they install a project. So that is kind of a protection for contractor and customer, just to make sure that they don't go all the way through with it and find out that the rebate won't be what they expected, or it won't be approved at all.
yeah, that makes complete sense. The only other item I guess I'll say is if there could be a kind of a clear outline, and I understand installations are complicated and you would never want to get to the point of a horrible customer experience and contractor experience where they ended up not being eligible and the system's online. But I guess as a group, if we can also outline all the reasons of why that would maybe occur and work to ensure that our installation processes are meeting those needs, I think that would also get us to like a really ideal state too, and maybe could push some of those approvals later down the line.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Brenna.
Rob, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was going to speak to the note about interconnection. So from an EDC perspective, I would say probably 99.9% of what we're collecting upfront in the current process gets collected by interconnection at various phases. And you like you had mentioned, Brenna, you're getting to this back and forth right in the upfront when you're just trying to get into the program of the back and forth, that you're missing this, you're missing that. Once you get through that, the same thing goes on within the interconnection world, sometimes even worse. We've seen situations where somebody will fill out the initial application and then will sit until like a signature or payment's made for the application. And sometimes that can be months. Yeah, like I think we looked at one today where it was like 8 months from when they applied to when they put signature and payment in. So I think that's, we're trying to shift away, and a very good point that you brought up. But, a lot of this stuff like permission to operate, in my mind, like we want to get that to be like the final checkbox and say, all right, because at that you don't get a permission to operate letter, right, unless everything else has been completed and vetted through. So to me, if you have that in hand, getting enrolled in the program, there should be no question or anything that required past that point. And I think that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah,
thanks.
that kind of sounds aligned with like the post PTO enrollment in the DERMS platform. If a device is online and communicating and you can see that, that means that, it's passed everything it needs to, right? The utilities have reviewed it and everything.
Yeah, we've done the witness test, we've everything. Sometimes interconnection. Sometimes they have to go out for the witness test. I mean, if you look at some of the documentation, you'll see schematics of where the battery is going to be located. You'll see pictures of where the battery is going to be located. But like everything in those documents is every field we're collecting today in the application. It's just, I think to the Green Bank, because they're in charge of the incentive program, and Ed cut me off from going misstating something here, but they're in charge of the incentives and ultimately having to report on Pure and track all these projects coming in. So they do need a record, right, within within their ecosystem of the applications, I guess. I'm sure if I'm phrasing that correctly. So we need to find out some way to get them what our interconnections capturing to put that within the Green Bank coffers, for lack of a better term. So that's the challenge, I think.
And I think from the Green Bank perspective, we're super excited to work with Eversource and UI to streamline some of that. So we are definitely going to be taking next steps to digest all the feedback and come up with a hopefully really good plan that helps mitigate some of the issues that were brought up on the call today. We've got about 8 minutes left, so let's keep going through questions. Anything that we can cover in the next 8 minutes. We got a couple hands up. Brenna, did you want to go?
I have one more question. Apologies.
Yeah, no.
Just from, again, I don't have any data for us to look on from our Sunrun perspective, but anyone who's currently in the program, or if anyone's able to share this, what is the current SLA for the basic approval that someone would be receiving before they can then submit it to Energy Hub? So kind of the DERMS platform that we're looking on of like passing information to Energy Hub, but we need to have CT Green Bank's approval prior to that. Has there been any slowdown? Or has that usually been pretty quick? I know that kind of goes into what we were just talking about as a pain point, but I'm curious from an operational standpoint.
Just so I understand the question, Brenna, kind of like the time period between the Connecticut Green Bank giving approval and then getting the process of the customer like sent to Energy Hub as a DERMS. Is that what you're talking about? Or?
Yeah, and I know we send the information to Energy Hub post PTO that the approval process are happening like earlier in the pipeline, but I guess has there been, what has the SLA been for that? And it's fine if that needs to be taken offline or shared later. But is it a few days? Is it 10 business days? Apologies if it's written somewhere else, I'll go check. But for us to understand how this would potentially slow down our pipeline is helpful information.
Sorry, Brennan, what is SLA?
It's basically the time that you'd be able to complete the task, I guess, if there's any, restrictions, or is there any commitment to when we submit it and then it will be approved?
When you submit it to the Green Bank versus when it can be approved by the Green Bank?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
The service level agreement, I guess.
Oh, okay. I don't think we have a guarantee in there, but maybe Matt or Mary could probably tell us like how long it typically takes to go from submitting an app to receiving a reservation of funds. I think right now it should only be a few business days because the volume's not super high. I don't know if anyone has any other experience with that.
Yeah, 5 business days normally from application submission to reservation of funds, assuming there's no reasons for a rejection or no additional information needed.
Okay, thank you.
Matt, does that assume that the same application has also been approved by the Green Bank in the DERMS portal? Because there might be I don't know if like there's 2 parallel streams, right? And so I think that's part of the question.
Right. Good question. Yeah, so that's separate. So I guess if we were to talk about from the completion application, so the 5 business days I mentioned is pre-installation and has to do with the upfront incentive reservation of funds. In terms of completion, completion, that process is different. Normally, when we verify the system's been installed, that we typically check and screen for enrollments in Energy Hub's platform and go through that process during payments. So when we're getting ready to send payments out, and typically we check in Energy Hub for any new enrollments that have surfaced, like once to twice a week. But again, that's a little like it's not as strict of a timeline, but I think that's what you're referring to, right? Not necessarily the ROF, but more so the post installation verification, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that's admittedly not super tight yet, because there are some things that we, as I showed earlier, are still trying to understand better. So that's one of the main objectives of this particular meeting here, is to be able to get that down so that we can shorten that as much as possible.
All right, we got 2 more hands up. Kyle, Kyle, you just dropped. If you're here. Yeah.
I mean, I was just gonna make a quick comment about the previous conversation of kind of trying to streamline that approval process and whether it could be done post PTO when everything is said. And I think this is something that has been talked about from the start of the program, of trying to figure out how to make these flows work together better. And I do think it is really tough, because it comes down to a question of risk tolerance and risk management. If it's a third party owner that is taking the incentive or using that to discount their price up front to the customer, and they're okay taking that risk to apply after the fact, and that may mean maybe they don't get into the block they thought, that as long as there's not a harm to the customer, maybe it's okay to do that. Definitely if the rebate is going to the consumer, that's much riskier and probably not a good idea to go down that path. So maybe there's an opportunity to explore whether it makes sense to have that as an option for certain types of projects. Alternatively, maybe it is possible to turn it into one flow where you do the upfront application to GreenBank, you get the reservation, you install the system, you complete the registration process through the DERMS, the OEM and the DERMS, and then once that process has been completed out, that essentially helps close out the GreenBank's flow. And that way it's, maybe not 2 separate flows, but it's trying to order it, maybe in a way that's a little easier to manage.
That's a good suggestion.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. And then Jessica, you have your hand up. So if you want to take the last couple minutes, please.
Thank you. I have a question regarding when we have we do have rather an OEM that we have been installing their equipment for, and when it comes down to the DERMS enrollment process, it seems that they are non-responsive once we have submitted the DERMS application, which they have on their website. And we have followed up with the GreenBank and Energy Hub about how to push this process with Solarc, and we're not getting anywhere. Can we, as the contractor, bypass the OEM and submit the information directly to Energy Hub so our customers are enrolled in the program?
Short answer there is no. I understand your frustrations with your specific OEM, and I think that's been felt across a few different contractors and even specific end customers that are looking for that. I do think that's an isolated incident and something or an isolated problem with this one OEM. So Jessica, I can reach out to you and give you the kind of latest update on what's happening with that OEM and how we are looking to resolve that, because it always is going to have to come through them, just because they have the device information and they're the ones that actually control it, right? It's not just like giving us a name, it's like giving us the access to the battery.
Is it to the point you think with some of these OEMs, with the one that we're discussing in particular, that there should be some communication from the Green Bank saying, hey, we are working with this OEM. This is an issue that we're aware of. We have customers that are very eager to be a part of the program and are feeling in the dark.
Yeah. I think there, can be more proactive communication from the all parties involved about where the customer's application is, like what status it's in, especially with the DERM. So I'll follow up with you separately about that.
Thank you.
All right, we are over time, but if there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We also can probably just share the last slide, which is next steps. So if you do have questions that pop up in between the next meetings, please reach out to Energy Storage at ctgreenbank.com. And please stay tuned for the next calendar invite for the meeting. That should be a wrap-up meeting on February 15th. So we really appreciate all of the feedback and participation in the working group call today. Hope that everyone has a great rest of the day. And again, if anything pops up that you can think of in between now and then, please reach out to us, and happy to look into it. So thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.